Naparima on the rising crime epidemic. There were contributions by the Minister of National Security, the member for Orpoosh East, the Attorney General, and the member for Chaguanas East. At 6 p.m., debate on the private motion was suspended. Mr. Ganga Singh raised a matter on the adjournment, the failure of the government to protect the public's interest in the acquisition by TSTT of Massey Communications for the sum of $255 million. The Minister of Public Utilities responded. Dr. Tim Gopi Singh also raised a matter on the adjournment, namely the failure of the government to effectively manage the dispensation of quality medication via the CDAP program. The Minister of Health responded. Prior to the adjournment, the House brought greetings to the nation in celebration of Indian Arrival Day on May 30th. The sitting concluded at 6:50 p.m. The House adjourned to Wednesday, May 31st, 2017 at 1:30 p.m. Stay tuned for more reports of The Ayes Have It. For more information, visit our website at www.ttparliament.org and follow us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter.
Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament.
The Honourable, the Speaker.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Dr. Fuad Khan, MP, member for Barataria San Juan. Mr. Rudranath Indar Singh, MP, member for Couva South. Honorable Ayana Webster Roy, MP, member for Tobago East. And Mrs. Christine Nualo Hussain, MP, member for Kamutu Manzanilla, have asked to be excused from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted.
Bills brought from the Senate. Petitions. Papers.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Finance, I have the honor to lay the following papers. 1. The audited financial statements of Invest TT Limited for the year ended September 30th, 2014. 2. The audited financial statements of Trinidad Nitrogen Company Limited for the year ended December 31st, 2016. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that papers 1 and 2 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker.
Honorable members, the question is that papers 1 and 2 be referred to the Public Accounts Enterprises Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Reports from committees.
Member for St. Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have the honor to present the following report. The second report of the Joint Select Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs for the second session 11th Parliament on the inquiry into food fraud in Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you.
Member Laventille West.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following report. The third report of the Joint Select Committee on National Security for the second session, 2016 to 2017, 11th Parliament, on an inquiry into the operations of the Trinidad and Tobago Forensic Science Center and the issue of DNA sampling in Trinidad and Tobago.
Member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to present the following reports. The seventh report of the Public Accounts Enterprise Committee of the 11th Parliament, second session, on the examination of the audited accounts, balance sheet, and other financial statements of the Estate Management and Business Development Company Limited, EMBD, for the financial years 2008 to 2010.
Prime Minister's questions. Urgent questions.
Member for Caroni East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Education, could the Minister state what immediate measures are being undertaken to resolve the hardships currently being experienced, including layoffs due to the non-payment of grants to the 14 government-assisted special needs schools to assist with salaries and school fees for special needs students or children?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I am pleased to report that of the 14 special schools, 2 schools have already been paid. The other 12 are undergoing verification, and as soon as that is completed, they will be paid. I have been told that all schools will receive their payments sometime in June for the latest. Thank you.
Member for Caroni East.
Is there any measure that you will take to prevent further layoffs, Honourable Minister, or those who have been laid off? How are you going to resolve that issue? Because they were laid off because of lack of payments.
Madam Speaker, it has not come to my attention that there have been any persons who have lost their jobs as a result of non-payment. I can assure the member for Caroni East that I will investigate that, and if that is the position, then we'll deal with it. Thank you.
Member for Pointe-a-Pierre.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Education, could the Minister state of the 12 schools that have not been paid, how many months are in arrears?
Minister Minister of Education.
Madam Chairman, that's a difficult question, I must confess. Those schools, those 12 schools who have not yet been paid, they will be paid by June this year. In terms of the number of months in arrears, I am not in a position to answer that question. Thank you.
Member for Shogunas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Attorney General, in light of recent newspaper reports of investigations into leaks of information from the Ministries of Tourism and Sport and Youth Affairs, what is the policy of the government on whistleblowing?
Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, I thank the honourable member for this question. The policy of the government is that whistleblowing should be formulated in an organised fashion. It is the reason why we brought forward a bill for the consideration in Joint Select Committee. Several submissions were received, including by those from the opposition, and we are in the course of tidying up those submissions to return with a bill for conclusion of the policy into legislation.
Member for Shogunas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Honourable Attorney General, while that the law has been formulated, if members of within the public sector and others provide us truth as information, that is not a crime, is it?
Attorney General.
I think it would be dangerous to just give a cavalier off-the-cuff response to a matter like that. Obviously, persons may give information in some circumstances where it is lawful to do so, but others may do so in breach of the terms of their contract or oaths of office, which may be tantamount to a breach of a statutory declaration for which the penalty is similar to perjury, including serious offences. So it would be dangerous to give a blanket answer to that statement, but suffice it to say, the government's position is that this area ought to be organised, and for that purpose we have legislation which we propose for the Parliament to enact into law.
Member for Shogunas West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Honourable Attorney General, when members of the public sector are hunted in the manner in which they are, then the Parliament must provide a shield.
Is that
yes,
a
do you
question?
believe this? Do you believe this?
I didn't quite understand whether there was a question.
That's what I've asked. Is that a question?
Yeah. I'm prefacing by saying when members of the public sector, employees of the public sector are hunted in a manner in specific ministries, do you think that the Parliament should provide a shield for those members?
Attorney General.
Yes, I think certainly that the Parliament should, and more so that the ministries and ministers with line responsibility should act with alacrity, deal with investigations into those matters so that propriety stands in the mix. I mean, after all, one can't encourage people to step forward and give evidence of impropriety and not deal with it in a fair and even-handed fashion. Hence the reason why it ought to be dealt with propriety.
Member for Caroni Central, question number 3.
Oh, I wanted to ask a follow-up question. Anyway, Madam Speaker, could the Minister of Energy and Energy Industries please confirm whether there has been new gas discoveries by BP in Trinidad and Tobago waters, as reported by the local press?
Leader of the House.
Sorry, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with respect to matters of this nature, I am advised that it is not appropriate for the government to announce discoveries of hydrocarbons without appropriate consultation with the oil companies involved, because it may have an influence on the share price of these companies. They are listed on stock exchanges internationally. I am further advised that the company, BPTT, will be making a statement tomorrow, at which I am sure all of your questions will be answered.
One of the issues that arises out of the possibilities before us is the fact that the fiscal regime which gave rise to these discoveries comes to an end at the end of this year, 2017. Has the government put in place a fiscal regime to follow?
Madam Speaker, at present we have a high-powered team in Trinidad and Tobago who have already had meetings with the oil and gas companies. Last Friday there was a consultation, and they are continuing their consultations with the oil and gas companies during this week on proposed modifications to the oil and gas fiscal regime for Trinidad and Tobago. I met with the team on Monday, and I will be meeting with them again on Friday after they have finished the second round of consultations with the oil majors and other interested parties. I particularly asked them to speak to the Energy Chamber and other stakeholders in the sector, and I expect by Friday we will have appropriate feedback from the companies in the sector as to what modifications should be made to the regime, whether the existing fiscal incentives should be extended or modified as the case may be, or whether there should be changes to the taxation regime, for example, with respect to the supplementary petroleum tax.
Member for Caroni Central.
One of the issues that will come up as gas discoveries come into play, and Juniper would be the first one this year, is the price at which gas is bought from the upstream producers and the price at which gas is supplied to the downstream producers, and the role of NGC in the process. Has this matter been resolved?
A supplementary question.
No problem, I could answer.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Finance. Based on recent reports that the government intends to increase its contribution to the Special Development Fund of the Caribbean Development Bank by 211% from $3.6 million to $11 million. Can the Minister state the rationale for this increase, given the nation's restricted foreign reserves?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, it is always a good idea for new members of Parliament to familiarize themselves with things that may have happened in the past, particularly from the governments whose party formed the government to which they now belong, such as the member for Point of Peer. I wish to advise the member for Point of Peer that Cabinet by minute number 488 of February 26, 2015, under the Prime Ministership of the Honourable Member for Siparia, agreed to this.
Member for Naparima.
Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance.
Order.
The Minister of Finance must be aware that the position or foreign exchange position in 2015 is much different to ours now. And could he answer the question and give a rationale in the context of the reduced availability of foreign exchange?
Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, this government does not renege on agreements made with international bodies like other governments have done before us. It is necessary for the credibility and integrity of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago when a government makes an agreement with an international multilateral financial institution such as the Caribbean Development Bank. It's not a good idea to go reneging on these agreements. What we are looking at, however, is the scheduling of this payment. It's over a 4-year period, but we intend to abide by the decision of the former UNC government to make this contribution to the Caribbean Development Bank, as difficult as it may be, because we are a responsible government.
Member for Point of Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question 5 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Speaker, thank you kindly. Madam Speaker, I'm asking for this question to be stood down to the end of the urgent questions, please. And there's another question to the Minister, which is question 10, which is the last question, so I'm asking this to be stood down to that time. Thank you kindly.
So, Member for Caroni East. Question number 6.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Finance, what urgent measures would the Minister undertake to deal with the widely publicized alleged corruption, nepotism, and mismanagement now at the Educational Facilities Company Limited?
Minister of Finance.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would not wish to associate myself with the allegations made by the member for Caroni East, but notwithstanding my refusal to associate with his allegations, an audit is in progress.
Member for Caroni East.
Could you tell us the audit is being done from which firm or company, or is it the Ministry of Finance, and when is the audit expected to begin and when expected to complete?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thought the words in progress meant that it has begun. That is the usual English meaning of in progress. So the audit has begun. With respect to how long it would take and with respect to who it is being done by, it is being done by the Ministry of Finance. With respect to how long it will take, that is not an answer I can give at this time, bearing in mind the short notice of that supplemental.
Member for Caroni East.
To the Attorney General, Madam Speaker, in light of the publicized alleged irregularities of misconduct, nepotism, and corruption at EFCL, would the Attorney General be prepared to urgently lay the findings of his investigation into EFCL in Parliament?
Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, much like the answer given by the Honourable Member for Diego Martin Northeast, I can say that the investigation, which is partly being conducted by the Office of the Attorney General, is contingent upon the outcome of an investigation which is in the course of proceeding by the Ministry of Finance Central Audit Unit. When that matter is brought to conclusion, all of the matters will be taken. In the event that there is a recommendation for prosecution or action, I would want to ensure that we would not be throwing the baby away with the bathwater by premature publication, and in those circumstances, I'm not in a position yet to indicate whether that can come public or not. The key would be to ensure that the correct action is taken and that one doesn't prejudice the action that can be taken.
Member for Orpuchis.
Very much, Madam Speaker. To the Attorney General, could the Attorney General indicate whether or not, as reported in the local press, the Attorney General attended a meeting of the Board of Directors of the Education Facilities Company Limited, and if he did, for what purpose?
Attorney General.
Thank you. In answer to the question, yes, I did attend a meeting, an emergency meeting, held with the members of the Board of Directors of the Education Facilities Limited, because when matters of irregularities came into the public domain, it was incumbent upon the Office of the Attorney General to bring those matters to the attention of the members of the Board of Directors and to demand an urgent report in respect of same so that proper action could be taken.
For Caroni East.
Are you referring, Honourable Attorney General, to the meeting that you were summoned by the Honourable Prime Minister to attend in August 2016? Is that the meeting you're speaking about, or has there been a subsequent meeting with the board?
I wasn't summoned to attend any meeting by the Prime Minister. Upon learning of allegations, the Attorney General approached the Prime Minister and the Minister of Education, because there's a line minister involved, to ensure that proper process is done. Based upon that, I called for an emergency meeting, held an emergency meeting, following which the Central Audit Committee was put into effect so that we could have answers to allegations, because the allegations stand on two ends. It is important to vindicate persons if there has been nothing done that is wrong, and also to ensure that propriety flows in the event that there has been something untoward.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of National Security, in light of the recent murders of 3 central business owners, can the Minister please state what is the status of Operations Enterprise and what measures have been implemented to provide safety in central Trinidad?
Security.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'm not quite sure what the member for Opuch West means by operations enterprise. I'm assuming that she means what is happening in the enterprise with respect to the presence of soldiers and police. I want to make it quite clear there's no code word called operation enterprise. All right? So I want to make it quite clear that that doesn't exist. What is happening right now, there's presence of police and soldiers in the enterprise area. We have set up and established a base in the Lionsgate area from which they mount patrols, both joint and mobile patrols. We continue, they have increased the number of personnel both on the Army side and the police side in the enterprise area. Continues to do intelligence-led operations. And we've continued also to intensify our efforts within the enterprise area, in fact, in the central area in its entirety. Additionally, we have identified a location to establish a permanent police station in the enterprise area. Madam Speaker.
Member for Shagona cease.
Honourable Minister, could you say what is that location for the permanent police station, and by what time will we be able to see works, either refurbishment or construction, and when you expect that police station to be completed for use by the members of the public?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The area is just off the Dar Straits, in the area of the Dar Straits Sports Field and around that general area, near to the Early Childhood Center. It's within that general area. As to the time frame, I can only say it will be done as soon as possible.
Honourable Minister, is it a building that was identified, or is it a place, a park of land for construction?
Minister of National Security.
Madam Speaker. In fact, we are looking at two options right now. One is a piece of land, and one a building that is presently on the site. So the two options that we are looking at right now, either utilizing the land or utilizing the building. No decision has been taken on which the options, probably right now.
Member for Oropouche West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, in light of recent reports of job cuts in Government Information Services Limited and the on-the-job training program, what measures have been implemented to assist persons who will be affected?
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would like to indicate on behalf of the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development that at this time, with regard to the on-the-job training program, it is persons within who were members of staff who were removed because there was a bloating of the OJT program under the last administration, and persons who were no longer necessary for the proper implementation of the work of the program have been removed. With regard to the GISL, similarly, an investigation was done with regard to how GISL operates and the staffing, and as a consequence of that, there were also measures put in place to remove persons. I would like to indicate that the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development has a series of programs in place for retraining of persons who have been retrenched or lost their jobs. And, the member for Oropouche East is always so callous. It is unfortunate that one is suicide. Very callous. Very callous. Yes, Madam Speaker.
May we have some order?
Yes, Madam Speaker. The Ministry of Labour has a series of programs in place for persons who have been retrenched or who have lost their jobs, and these persons will be able to access these series of programs.
Members, unfortunately, the question time has been spent. I will allow question 5, which was deferred. Member for Point-a-Peer.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Minister of Works and Transport, based on the recent reports at the Bay Ferries Management Limited, the company which had the contract to service the inter-island passenger ferries, was paid $854,475 US dollars for its last management contract, as opposed to $7 million US dollars, as stated by the Prime Minister at a press conference. Can the Minister provide the House with the actual figure that was paid to BFCL?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the figure paid to Bay Ferries is in excess of $7 million per year, comprising of a management fee of $91,000 per month, plus an operational fee of $250,000 per month. Thank you.
Number 10, member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 10 to the Minister of Works and Transport. Can the Minister state whether any vessels have been identified to replace the 2 passenger vessels currently operating the sea bridge between Port of Spain and Scarborough?
Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you. Thank you again, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are in the process of identifying vessels to replace the 2 passenger vessels, which, when identified, will be subjected to pre-charter condition survey inspection by Lloyd's of London negotiators and Cabinet's approval. Thank you.
Questions on notice, questions for oral answer.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are answering all oral questions and all written questions. We will present the written responses shortly for distribution.
Member for Oropuch West.
Question number 123 to the Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, I thank the member for the question. Upon its closure, Carney Green Limited made payments amounting to $1,251,293 to 67 former employees. These payments were made as follow. For 43 employees who had more than 1 year's service with the company, the payments covered severance, calculated in accordance with the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act, payment in lieu of notice, and payment for outstanding vacation leave. For 15 former employees with more than 6 months but less than 1 year's service, these employees were paid 45 days' pay and the equivalent of 2 weeks' pay prorated for each year of service. And for 9 employees with 3 to 6 months' service, these employees were paid the equivalent of 45 days' pay. No payments were made to 12 former employees with less than 5 weeks' service. Thank you.
Member for Oropuch West.
Minister, were any of those workers' contract prematurely terminated?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, given the fact that this closure was executed in accordance with the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act, none of the workers were terminated prematurely. They were terminated on the basis set out in the Retrenchment and Severance Benefits Act. Thank you.
Carney East.
In addition to the retrenchment payment, is the Ministry of Agriculture doing anything to help and facilitate these employees who have been retrenched? Further.
Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, apart from the support given by the Ministry of Labour, of these 79 former employees, 60 worked as labourers. And those 60 we expect would be absorbed based on the demands of the farmers across the country, in particular Central Trinidad. 5 of those workers performed work related to security work, and I expect that they would find employment in similar types of jobs. And 14 of those workers were either skilled or professional employees who we expect, with the support of the Ministry of Labour, would find opportunities elsewhere in the country. Thank you.
Member for Carney East.
Your answer, Honourable Minister, and the closure of the farm, would these employees be looking forward to subsequent employment in the same Mojaloo farm, or what is going to be done about it?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, the bulk of the workers, as I said, 60 of them are labourers who have worked not only with Carney Green Limited, previously with the Carney Green Initiative, and before that with Carney 1975 Limited, and I expect that they would be absorbed in opportunities which I know exist in Trinidad and Tobago.
Cease.
Madam Speaker, could the Minister indicate what use you're going to put the lands that have now been abandoned by the closure of the Carney Green project?
Minister of Agriculture, Land and Fisheries.
Madam Speaker, there are two sites which were previously used by Carney Green Limited, a total of about 50 acres. The first site is at Monjaloo in Cunupia, the constituency of Carney East, and I believe I've already signaled to the MP that those lands would be used to expand the grass forage bank that exists in Monjaloo to support about central Trinidad. In relation to the site at Union Estate, that site would be made available by the Commissioner of State Lands to those persons across the country who are interested in lands for agricultural purposes.
Member for Oropuch West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 125 to the Prime Minister.
Leader of the House.
Acting President.
Acting Prime Minister.
21 times.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of the Office of the Prime Minister, the United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, encourages its member states to observe Child Abuse Prevention Month. The main objective of this observance is to sensitize the public about strategies to prevent and reduce the incidences of child abuse which plague our society. According to a 2000 World Health report in the Caribbean, 47% of girls and 31% of boys experienced forced sexual contact. Based on statistics and reports from the Children's Authority of Trinidad and Tobago of child abuse, the Office of the Prime Minister sought out voluntary and paid services to increase such awareness and eradicate child abuse. The main public relations education efforts culminated in a mass information sharing featuring child-related ministries and agencies and a program within Trinidad and Tobago's main transportation hub, Citygate. Due to the public relations efforts prior to the event and the ideal location, over 5,000 pieces of child abuse prevention information and communication material were distributed. The cost breakdown for the public education and sensitization efforts for National Child Abuse Prevention Month is as follows. The decor, $1,405. Videography, $2,500. Music, $2,120. Caterer, $4,500. Copyright Association, $662. Token, $7,620. Ambulance, free. Rental of tables, chairs, etc., $595. Graphics, signage, $20,058. The media campaign. Daily News, advertisements, $11,970. Daily News Limited strip ads, again, $11,025. Trinidad Express strip ads, $15,592. TV6 interview, free. Power 102 interview, free. Slam 104 interview, free. Channel 5 Tobago interview, free. Radio 92.7 Tambourine Tobago interview, free. CNC3 Morning Brew interview, free. Radio 98.1 FM interview, free. CNMG Good Morning interview, free. The total cost for the media campaign, $38,587. With respect to text messages, 200,000 anti-child abuse text messages were sent out, free, no cost. Radio advertising, production, $2,800. Gem Music Group, $2,500. Family Focus Network, $2,587. KMP Music Group, $2,531. Trinidad and Tobago Radio Network, $4,725. Guardian Media, $3,375. Power 102 FM, $1,687,000. Total production and radio advertising, $20,206. Total cost of all the activities, $98,255.
Member for Oropuch West.
Madam Speaker, question number 126 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, the Ministry of Education hosted a national consultation on working together to deliver quality education during the period January 25th to to February 22nd, 2016, to gain stakeholder feedback on identified issues that would inform the ministry's education sector strategic plan 2016 to 2020. One of the focal areas discussed was reducing violence, bullying, and indiscipline in schools. The participants included students, teachers, school administrators, as well as representatives from the following agencies and associations, all of whom made valuable contributions to the consultative process. National associations including the National Parent Teachers Association, the Trinidad and Tobago Unified Teachers Association, the Association of Principals of Primary Private Schools, the National Primary Schools Principals Association, the Association of Principals of Public Secondary Schools, the Association of Principals of Assisted Secondary Schools, the Association of Principals of Private Secondary Schools, the Montessori Association, special needs groups such as the Association and the Autism Association, the Private Sector Schools Association, the Public Special Schools Association. Education interest groups including ALTA, Moms for Literacy, the Education Discussion Group, the Home Schoolers Association of Trinidad and Tobago, 20 denominational boards of education, the Catholic Religious Education Development Institute, tertiary institutions including the University of the West Indies, the University of Trinidad and Tobago, the University of the Southern Caribbean, UWI Roytech, the College of Science, Technology and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago, the Inter-Religious Organization, volunteer and service organizations, for example, Junior Achievement of Trinidad and Tobago and the Cotton Hill Foundation, the MIC Institute of Technology, the National Association of Library and Information Services, the Tobago House of Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, with respect to reducing the level of indiscipline in primary schools, could the Minister indicate how many guidance officers are currently employed to service the totality of primary schools in the country, and whether he considers this adequate or unsatisfactory?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, with respect to our primary schools, we do not have a guidance officer in each primary school. The guidance officers operate from the district offices. So there is a guidance officer in each district office that will serve a cluster of primary schools, either 4 or 5. Thank you.
Minister, in addition to the recommendations made by the various bodies under the consultation, would you indicate if they are markedly different from the programs and policies, the 23 programs and policies you inherited in the Ministry of Education that was set by your predecessor's team?
Madam Speaker, the discussions that emanated from the National Consultation on Education with respect to violence and indiscipline in schools focus on a number of measures that can be put in place to ensure that there is a decrease in the level of indiscipline and violence. We did not look at what the member for Caroni East has spoken about, but what I can say is that arising out of those discussions and some of the recommendations which have been put in place, we have been able to achieve a drastic and dramatic decrease in the incidence of violence and indiscipline in our schools. Thank you.
Princess now.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. To the Honourable Minister. Honourable Minister, when this issue first arose, you had indicated that you were looking for support from the UNDP's office with respect to the issue of bullying. I notice you have not indicated that as one of the organizations. Could you please clarify whether, in fact, that you did consult with them or any of these anti-bullying associations, which was not mentioned at all?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, in our effort to ensure that there is a great reduction in this scourge, we are consulting with many interest groups, including the UNDP. Thank you.
Member for Chaguanas East. Member for Carrick East.
Is the Minister aware that there are at least 23 recommended protocols and policies and that have been used and implemented in reduction of this student deviant behavior and violence? And if so, if you are aware, are you continuing to implement those policies?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, I am not aware of any 23 protocols that deal with the reduction of violence and indiscipline in our schools. What I know, Madam Speaker, is that at present, officers of the Ministry of Education are working assiduously to ensure the reduction of indiscipline and the violence in our schools. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Question number 134 to the Minister of Works and Transport.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, let me just start by saying no cost was incurred in respect to the procurement process. By letter dated March 28, 2017, the agent of the vessel MV Galicia advised the Ministry of Works and Transport of the owner's decision to withdraw the vessel from service with effect from April 14, 2017. Subsequent correspondence from the agent dated April 10, 2017 received the last day of sailing as April 21, 2017. In this circumstance, the decision was taken by the Ministry of Works and Transport and the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago to immediately source an interim cargo solution. In addition, an official invitation to tender was issued by the Port Authority for the replacement vessel for a period of 24 months, with an option to renew for a further 12 months. The long-term procurement process is still ongoing. However, in order to address the immediate short-term requirements for the cargo service between Trinidad and Tobago, the Port Authority requested quotations from service providers who had expressed an interest in providing a short-term solution. Unsolicited offers were also received. 10 proposals were eventually received, including 7 unsolicited offers. The 10 proposals were reviewed by the port management, and 3 were found to be responsive, specifically 2 cargo vessels, the Atlantic Provider and the JF 438 Elizabeth Ross, and a barge, the MV Trinity Transporter. The Port Authority Tender Committee subsequently convened a special meeting on April 18, 2017 to consider the matter. Of the 3 options, the only 2 which were immediately available in order to facilitate an uninterrupted inter-island cargo ferry service were the Atlantic Provider and the barge, the MV Trinity Transporter. Both vessels are locally owned. Given the capacity of the vessel's subsequent and its historical demand on the route, it was decided by the Tenders Committee that the best configuration would be a vessel and a barge as an interim solution, while the Port Authority continued its search for a ro-ro cargo vessel. And again, I just want to reiterate, no cost was incurred in respect to the procurement process. Thank you.
The Minister indicate whether or not the fees for the vessels are being paid in US dollars.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, when you're dealing with the maritime industry, all fees are calculated in US dollars. So I would expect that the quotation was in US dollars, and the Port Authority of Trinidad and Tobago will be looking into that matter.
Thank you very much. Could the Minister indicate the cost so far and confirm first on the cost that the truck drivers on these, whose trucks are going on the cargo vessels, they are provided, could you confirm whether or not they are provided free transportation by the Port Authority to and from Tobago? And what might that cost be?
I will allow that as a supplemental question. Member for Oropouche West.
Honourable Minister, is it true that one of the vessels took 15 hours instead of 9 because only 2 of the engines were working and not 4?
Madam Speaker, I don't understand. We're talking about the cargo vessel here. I don't think that question relates to the cargo vessel. Thank you.
Minister, in light of your statement in this House before, could you indicate whether or not you are prepared to make the pre-action protocol letter you sent to the owners and or agents of the Galicia to make that letter public?
I will allow that as a supplemental question under the question here. Member for Tabakit.
Question number 138 to the Minister of Education.
Minister of Education.
I want to hear.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The Special Education Unit of the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education provides special education services through an established system of referral and intervention. Students manifesting characteristics associated with ADD/ADHD are screened and referred to the relevant professionals for diagnosis, followed by medical and educational intervention. Individualized education programs are developed for each student based on the clinical findings of respective professionals and the confirmation of their functional special education needs. B, the list of schools that benefited from these programs. Madam Speaker, I have circulated a list of 180 schools where interventions are conducted continuously by the Student Support Services Division of the Ministry of Education. And C, the number of teachers who have been trained since April 22nd, 2016 to identify students who suffer from ADD/ADHD. Madam Speaker, since April 22nd, 2016, 485 teachers at the early childhood, primary, and the secondary school levels have been trained to identify students with ADD/ADHD. Students so identified are then referred to psychologists and other professionals for diagnosis and treatment.
Would the Minister care to say who does the screening at the level of the schools in order to determine whether a child has ADD or ADHD?
Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. There is a process that is followed. The first form of identification has to be made by the parent or by the teacher. When a child shows signs that would indicate that he is suffering from some disability, then that child is referred to the Student Support Services after consulting with the parents. Thank you.
For Tabakit.
Honourable Minister, through the Speaker, you said 485 teachers have been trained to do this. Are there experts in the Student Support Services Division who have been specifically trained and certified in identifying children with ADD and ADHD?
Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, my information is that there are a number of persons who form part of the Student Support Services Division who have the competence and the expertise to deal with this. That's the information I have. Thank you.
Request for leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance, statements by ministers, personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House and moved by a minister, public business, government business, bills second reading.
Honourable members, at a sitting of the House of Representatives held on Friday, May 19, 2017. The Attorney General had completed his wind-up of the Bail Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017. I will now put the question for the second reading. The question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460, be now read a second time. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460.
Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, in accordance with Standing Order 68-1, I beg to move that the Bail Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017 be committed to the Committee of the Whole.
Honourable members, the question is that the Bail Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017 be committed to the Committee of the Whole. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. The House will now go into the Committee of the Whole to consider the bill, clause by clause.
Madam Chair, if I could just indicate that we've asked the clerk to circulate some very short amendments.
Have they as yet been circulated?
No, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, if I just interject, I mean, through the Attorney General, I mean, we could have circulated these amendments sooner.
Unfortunately, it's the Parliament to circulate and not me. So I just checked the same question myself.
Members, I just ask you all to be a bit patient. I'm just ascertaining how long it will take before I determine what next we do. This committee is suspended for 5 minutes.
What level of incompetence is this? Calling me away on a Wednesday to waste my time. What we're trying to do. You're forcing over $100,000 case. Might not get an appeal.
You're viewing the Parliament Channel 11, also broadcasting on 105.5 FM.
Two to 4 Knox Street has been the site of a municipal building since 1899, when this key area around Woodford Square was home to several significant political and religious buildings. The present City Hall is a distinguished example of 1950s architecture, which reflected a move away from traditional colonial styles towards a more modern and functional aesthetic. In 1899, Cocoa Baron and Deputy Mayor Leon Agostini sold the property to the City Council for the sum of $38,000, and from then on it has been used for municipal purposes. Between 1899 and 1907, the Town Hall housed barristers' chambers, club rooms, and governmental department offices. A devastating fire in 1948, however, destroyed the building, and as a result, the administration of Port of Spain was conducted from the Prince's Building, which was at the south of the Savannah. Architects Pryor, Lorenco, and Northnagel were hired to design the new town hall. The architecture of the building came out of the post-World War II modernist movement. Trinidad and Tobago was developing quickly, and independence was in the air. There was a lot of interest in creating architecture that was moving in a new direction, away from traditional modes of building. The architecture of City Hall was adapted for the climate in a style that was called tropical modernism.
If you look at the number of features of the building in terms of common areas and the way that certain areas were naturally ventilated, the way that certain areas don't rely on air conditioning. And also if you look at the plan of City Hall, on the north side of Woodford Square there is a kind of courtyard area that opens out onto the sidewalk. They're buildings that were designed in consideration of the climate. Features were designed in terms of the building envelope, the circulation spaces, and there was a sort of maximization of the natural ventilation potential of the building. And also its relation to the sun, different times of the day, I think were carefully considered in buildings.
Large windows and well-placed breeze blocks allowed the open offices to be filled with light and air. Unlike previous colonial municipal buildings, the new City Hall was an accessible public building that also fit into the surrounding environment without dominating it. Even the auditorium, used for various cultural and municipal purposes, was designed to be easily accessed by the public from the street. The new building was a move away from architecture that was assertive and authoritarian towards something more encompassing.
But I think it was attempting to be a public building and to fit into the landscape. If you look at the scale of it, scale of it along Frederick Street and along Woodford, from the elevation on Woodford Square, it's not a dominant building. Its scale is consistent with the buildings around it. And again, if you look at the way that the little courtyard space and the way that the hall opens out onto the sidewalk, these were all gestures that I think were intended to break down that notion or idea that a government building was something separate and represented an authority, but it was part of a much more democratic process and a softening of the line between the private sort of world of the administrative domain, the governed society, and the public dimension of society.
In 1958, the foundation stone for the new City Hall was laid by Princess Margaret. Just 3 years later, in 1961, the new building was completed and renamed City Hall. It became the seat of the municipal government for Port of Spain. A mural by acclaimed artist Carlisle Chang, entitled Conquerabia, can be found on the ground floor of the building. The name of the piece comes from Port of Spain's original Amerindian name. The 41-foot mural is like a plan of Port of Spain. The Red House, the Old Town Hall, and several key buildings are etched into the concrete. Amerindian motifs are included, as well as images that represent the diverse religions of Port of Spain.
The Carlisle Chan piece in there, I think, is a very interesting feature of the building. And if you look at a lot of buildings from that time, they did integrate works of art. A number of buildings in Port of Spain did that. And I think that this building, works very well in the way that that piece is integrated, and I think we should do a lot more of that.
Port of Spain City Hall is emblematic of a time when colonial institutions were being dismantled in favor of a more open and local approach to governance.
This committee meeting is now resumed. I'd just like to say to all members that Parliament's time is very precious, and for all those who support the work of the Parliament, I would like that at least if we get things in a timely manner, we'd be able to do our part to ensure that our time here is optimized.
Clause 1.
The question is that Clause 1 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 1 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 1 now stands part of the bill. Clause 2. The question is that Clause 2 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 2 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 2 now stands part of the bill. Clause 3. The question is that Clause 3 stand part of the bill. The question is that Clause 3 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 3 now stand part of the bill. Clause 4. The question is that Clause 4 stand part of the bill.
Madam Chair, we propose that there be some modification to Clause 4 and the version circulated to members. If I may explain, the first modification appears at Clause 4AC, which is at page 2 of the bill. Instead of registered financial institution, we propose that it read a licensed financial institution, which would be in keeping with the definition used for Financial Institutions Act, Chapter 7909. The second amendment proposed is a reorganization simply of words but not content for Clause 4B. Similarly, we propose that Clause 4C be reworded as appears. Again, the content remains the same. It's a matter of language. The last amendment that we propose in Clause 4 is the deletion of the word prisons and instead the substitution for the word police, and that is to take care of the error that we had in including Commissioner of Prisons as opposed, sorry, Commissioner of Police was stated as opposed to Commissioner of Prisons. It's in the reverse. So we're removing the error where Commissioner of Police was referred to and instead submitting Commissioner of Prisons.
Member for Superior.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. These amendments will not cure, in my respectful view, the defects and the weaknesses that we had pointed out in the debate. For the record, I want to repeat those and to save us time to get to other important matters. I just want for the record to say I do not agree that these amendments will deal with issues that we raised in the debate.
Attorney General.
Sure, Madam Chair, we looked at the observations of the honourable members opposite and respectfully didn't agree with those recommendations, and so we have simply tabled the amendments in position that we have.
The question is that clause 4 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 4 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 5. The question is that clause 5 now stand part of the bill. Attorney General.
Madam Chair, we listened to the contributions of members opposite and felt that there was merit in including a provision of consent with respect to the issue of property, and that is the concept of treating with money and its forfeiture, notwithstanding the fact that the existing law does provide for forfeiture in terms provided at section 19 in particular of the existing act. We've sought to treat with an amendment to clause 5 in terms circulated by expressly providing that any forfeiture be done with the consent of the defendant. And we were grateful for the reference to the Jamaican law, which we too had a look at, and so we have adopted a clause similar to clause 19 of the Jamaican equivalent.
Member for Superior.
I note the AG's comments with respect to the constitutional matters that were raised, where money was to be forfeited. We agreed in existing law does allow for forfeiture, but it didn't say you could apply a person's money any which way for which it was not, in fact, taken or forfeited. So this may assist, but I still believe this bill is seriously flawed, and we will put that on the record and move on.
So noted and beg to differ.
The question is that clause 5 be amended as circulated. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. The question is that clause 5 as amended now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 6. The question is that clause 6 stand part of the bill. The question is that clause 6 now stand part of the bill. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 6 now stands part of the bill. Honourable members, the question is that the bill as amended be now reported to the House. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against say no. I think the ayes have it. This committee meeting is now adjourned. Attorney General.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to report that the Bail Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017 was considered in Committee of the Whole and approved with amendments. I now beg to move that the House agree with the committee's report.
Honourable members, the question is that this House agree with the committee's report on the Bail, Access to Bail Amendment Bill 2017. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460, be forthwith read a third time and passed.
Honourable members, the question is that a bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 460, be now read a third time and passed. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? No. I think the ayes have it.
A bill entitled An Act to Amend the Bail Act, Chapter 4.60. Government business motions. Motion number 1.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved that a joint select committee be established to consider the first report of the committee established to review the levels of healthcare delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, as well as the second report of the committee to review the levels of healthcare delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, laid in the House of Representatives on November 9th, 2016 and March 24th, 2017, respectively. And be it further resolved that this committee be mandated to review and analyze the reports, B, consider the findings and recommendations contained in the reports, and C, thank you, report its observations and recommendations no later than, we have here June 5th, Madam Speaker, but as the debate proceeds, I would suggest a different date. Madam Speaker, I would like to indicate that what we're asking this House to move to do is to establish a joint select committee. Madam Speaker, the objectives of the joint select committees that have been established in this House, some of them are permanently existing joint select committees, is really to give an overview and for members of the Parliament to examine various aspects of the work of the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, what we are requesting this House to establish is a joint select committee that will look at the two reports that have been presented. The reports are entitled the Dr. Welsh reports, to examine what those reports contain and to give the members of Parliament the opportunity to make a close examination of the content of those reports and report back to the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, it is our objective to ensure that the Parliament participates in this process. It is very clear, Madam Speaker, that healthcare is one of the issues that continues to be a concern in Trinidad and Tobago. And the report that has been laid in the Parliament attempts to give solutions to the issues that have plagued the healthcare system in Trinidad and Tobago. Our objective, therefore, is to allow the people's representatives to go through a detailed analysis of the report, to come back to the Parliament and give their findings as it relates to the report, whether they agree, whether they disagree with some of the findings and recommendations that the report has given, but to allow the people's representatives through the process of a joint select committee to examine the report in depth. Madam Speaker, it is clear that for transparency and also for all members in this House to be given the opportunity to examine the report in depth, the best mechanism for doing this, we feel on this side, is through the mechanism of a joint select committee. Madam Speaker, I am asking that the members on the opposite side agree with us on this side that such a committee be established, and that once that agreement is had, that this matter will go before the Senate for a similar agreement to be reached. Madam Speaker, I don't think I need to go into the merits or demerits of why we need a joint select committee, but a joint select committee is not something that is foreign to the parliamentary process. And I am of the firm view that once we establish the joint select committee, we can review and analyze the reports. We can consider all the findings in depth and in detail and make recommendations, whether we agree or disagree with the recommendations that are within the reports, and we can report our observations and recommendations to this House. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
Honourable members, I will now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that a joint select committee be established to consider the first report of the committee established to review the levels of health care delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, as well as the second report of the committee to review the levels of health care delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, laid in the House of Representatives on November 9th, 2016 and March 24th, 2017, respectively. And be it further resolved that this committee be mandated to A, review and analyze the report, B, consider the findings and recommendations considered in the reports, and C, report its observations and recommendations no later than June 5th, 2017. Member for Faizabad.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. I would just want for the records indicate with regards to the motion, be it resolved that the Joint Select Committee be established to consider the first report of the committee established to review the levels of healthcare delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, as well as the second report of the committee to review the levels of healthcare delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice, laid in the House of Representatives on November 9, 2016 and March 24, 2017, respectively. And the motion further goes on to state, and be it further resolved, that this committee be mandated to A, review and analyze the reports, B, consider the findings and recommendations contained in the reports, and C, report its observations and recommendations no later than June 5th, 2017. Madam Speaker, I thank the Minister of Planning and Development for the opportunity to provide members of this House the opportunity to look and examine issues in the health sector. Before I go further, I would want to take note of the fact that the date of June 5th, and I agree that that is a very restrictive date, and I would look forward to more comment on that date. Madam Speaker, after crime and the economy, healthcare and health service provision remain uppermost in the minds of the population today. In fact, I agree with the Minister that healthcare is of concern in Trinidad and Tobago, and in fact, it might be high up on the list of concern. Many have said that the health sector has deteriorated under this government and that the health sector is in crisis. An Express article of April 22nd, 2017, Madam Speaker, written by Camille Hunt, says that crisis in nation's hospitals. And if you will permit me to quote from this newspaper article, Madam Speaker, the article notes that the 2017 national budget allocation is 6.25 billion, but goes on to state, and I quote, "But still there are too few public hospital beds, too many patients waiting years for life-saving surgeries, too many shortcomings in the maintenance of vital equipment, such as the recent fiasco with the CT scanners, the horrendously long time patients have to wait for health care." And the list goes on, and I quote again, "Urgently needed medications run short, while patients wait in long lines for prescriptions to be filled. Infant mortality remains a challenge, while a brand new hospital lies dormant and unoccupied." So this is what this newspaper report is saying. Some are saying that the health sector is terminally ill, in need of urgent resuscitation.
Standing Order 48-1, please.
Member for Faisabad, I'll allow you some leeway. Remember, all this has to deal with is the appointment of the Joint Select Committee. Okay, so that while I allow you some leeway for context, remember, reviewing and analyzing is what is the mandate of the committee, considering findings, recommendation. So it's not really a debate about the health sector. So just be careful.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm so guided. Madam Speaker, I want to indicate that I'm just providing a context for discussion of the report. And, Madam Speaker, I will get to the report and look at a few details, but I just thought it's important to provide the context. And in fact, I am agreeing with the member who indicated that there is some sort of crisis in the health sector. And that's what I'm speaking about, Madam Speaker. I will just, in passing, Madam Speaker, without quoting from these reports, just again to note, if you may allow, health sector needs emergency care. This is September 15, 2016. I'm just providing a background, Madam Speaker. With regards to the CT scanners, Port of Spain, Grandis, Sando CT scanners down, Mount Hope alone serving Trinidad and Tobago. This is March 28, 2017. And there are several articles that pertain to the...
Speaker, Standing Order 48-1.
Okay, so, member, I'd ask you not to dwell on it. If you're saying that is answering the crisis, I will allow you, as I say, some latitude, but please, this is not the debate about the health sector or the crisis in the health sector. Member for Caroni Central, the report is not before us. And while I should not recognize you, I will. I know that matters of health might be very important to all of us. And therefore, I'd ask each member to please observe the standing orders and control their anxiety. Member for Faisabad.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I will be so guided. And in fact, Madam Speaker, just to perhaps explain to the House where I'm going with this, really and truly what I'm trying to show is that although there have been many ills reported in the health sector, there have also been some good things that have happened. And I was coming to this point, and if the member will permit me to just delve a little bit further, and I will come to what is also the sectors, the good things are happening in this sector. So, Madam Speaker, we are all aware that there have been numerous reports, and I have categorized these under diagnostics, under drug shortages and cancer care, a number of articles regarding customer service. And again, with caution, Madam Speaker, I think it's important to understand why this debate is important. In fact, this is perhaps the reason why this report has been commissioned in the first place, because of all these issues. And with caution, I would want to, and there are some things that are pointing, for example, hospitals at crisis point, institutions have less than half the staff needed. And I say that, Madam Speaker, because the issue of staff is addressed in this report. And of course, there's an article on public doctors and private practice, and all of this is within the report, and this is in today's newspaper. But be that as it may, Madam Speaker, we are all aware. We are all aware of the situation that's facing us. But I also wanted, before I went into the report, to note, and again, there is a point I'm making here, because the issue of healthcare really has to be developed on both sides. And I was going to speak about, Madam Speaker, often we hear in this House of the continuity of government. And with regards to that, I was going to speak about the battle on non-communicable diseases and the improvements in maternity care. I'm taking this forward to show that, of course, a JSC can benefit the country by looking at this report. I'm getting to a point, member. Don't get too upset.
Could we have some order? Could we have some order?
And I am saying, sorry.
Members, might I remind you of Standing Order 53 with respect to members not speaking. Member for Faisal.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So I am saying that the health sector, when we speak about continuity of government, one such area where this has to be practiced. And, the reason for this, Madam Speaker, is because there are certain interventions in healthcare where the provision and the end result is not immediately available. In my own field, it refers to a gestation period. In other words, an intervention is taken 6 months ago, but it now becomes apparent. And the reduction in infant and maternal mortality is one such outcome, Madam Speaker. The member for St. Joseph, Minister of Health, is justifiably happy whenever he speaks of these issues. But of course, the member also will admit that, and I appreciate the fact that he's taking a very personal interest in this. But he will also appreciate the fact that the groundwork for this intervention would have started under the previous government. And of course, that would have been in the appointment of a committee to review the maternity services, which of course was commissioned by the previous Prime Minister Kamal Prasad Bisesa. But be that as it may, I think it's important that the minister would have bought into it. And I know that he has appointed a director of women's health, very, very important position in regards to maternity services. The point I'm making is that it's important for ministers in successive governments to be able to build on previous improvements, but also whilst adding their own value, as this minister has done, going forward. That's the point I'm making, Madam Speaker. In fact, with regards to that report, Madam Speaker, through you, if I may, and again, I'm just here in terms of making suggestions. If I can invite the minister, and that is one important position that came out of that report, and Minister, if I can invite you to give serious consideration to another recommendation that came from that report, and
which could be dealt with.
We're talking about the November 9, 2016 report and the March 2017 report. And all I'm saying, member, is that the review and analysis of the report, the observations, the recommendations is what is the mandate of the GSC that we are asking to appoint. So I'm not going to allow us to go in to any analysis, review, recommendations here.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm guided. So, Madam Speaker, let us then examine the report that is before us today without debating the report. And before I go or mention any details of the report, Madam Speaker, I just want to make some broad observations on the report. And the reason for this is because we are asking members to sit on a joint select committee. And therefore, I think it is only fair that perhaps those members who are going to sit on the joint select committee have some idea, of what the report is about in terms of.
I will ask you to keep it very tight.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So So, Madam Speaker, on page 1 of the report, and if you'll permit me just to refer, because this in fact is a report that's before us, we note that by letters dated November 15, 2015, the Cabinet of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago established a committee, and the mandate of the committee, of course, was to review the levels of healthcare delivery by the RHAs and to rationalize a system of public sector doctors in private practice. Madam Speaker, I also note that these reports were presented to the House some 12 months later for the first report and 16 months later. I just want again, Madam Speaker, and if you will permit me, and I made the point of the report being commissioned in 15th November, and if you will just permit me to refer to an article of the Trinidad Express, November 25th, 2015. And again, this refers to the great public expectation that is associated with this report. The report is entitled Another Health Shame by the Trinidad Express. But I just want to make the point, and just to quote from this report, amid the grand sweep of a health sector review by a blue-chip team of government-appointed experts, serial performance failures such as those continue as reminders of the distance to go toward meeting routine service expectations.
Madam Speaker, Standing Order 48-1, please.
Member, could you please move on to the other point?
Yeah, Madam, that report was just to indicate that the public is awaiting the results of this debate.
I just want to seek some clarification, please.
Is it on a standing order?
Seek clarification. Please.
Under what members? Again, I would like members who are not speaking to observe the standing orders, please. Member, is it a standing order that you're raising?
I just need some leeway from you, Madam Speaker.
But it has to be pursuant to a standing order, member. Member for Viceroy.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, Madam Speaker, the motion before us asks us to consider this report, sending this report to a joint select committee. And the question in my mind, Madam Speaker, is whether sending this report to a joint select committee of this Parliament, and by so doing, of course, engaging the time, the energy, and the effort of the members, will do one of two things. Will it bring measurable improvement in the delivery of healthcare to citizens? And I'm asking this question. And whether it will improve the health status of the nation. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, the motion tells us that the mandate of the GSC will be to review and analyze the reports, to consider the findings and recommendations contained in the report, and to report its observations and recommendations. Well, Madam Speaker, the output of the findings and deliberations of any joint select committee will, of course, depend on what it is fed, the input. So I think it is only fair that, I should look at the quality of the report and make some comments. And this is where I'm going, Madam Speaker. I also want to make it very clear at the onset, Madam Speaker, that we on this side are willing to offer any and all assistance to the government when it comes to treating with healthcare and indeed all other issues that are now engaging the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. So with this in mind, Madam Speaker, I again want to refer to page 1 of the report where it speaks of the levels of healthcare delivery. But I also note that the committee did not take the opportunity to tell the reader of this report what was their definition of levels of healthcare delivery. Instead, the reader is left guessing as to what the committee's interpretation of levels means. And perhaps, maybe the Minister of Health might want to, in his presentation, speak further to this. But I ask the government, through you, Madam Speaker, what exactly does levels include? And does it include efficiency of services? Does it include the effectiveness of interventions?
Member, again, while I appreciate your overall point in terms of saying what is fed in could only affect what is fed out, I'm not going to let you go into the observations which, as a committee, if it had to deliberate, it could look at that as an observation. So as far as broadly dealing with it, as you first said in your first statement, I allow that. Please be careful.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm so guided. I just, again, would move on and make a few other comments, Madam Speaker. And one of the issues for a member sitting on the Joint Select Committee to examine this report would be, the lack of statistics and references to support many of the recommendations. I wanted to make that point. And it appears, in fact, that this report may be neither data-driven nor data-backed. Some of the recommendations I note are so broad, Madam Speaker, that it may be difficult for members to deliberate. And indeed, it is my opinion, Madam Speaker, that some of these recommendations would have been better. I'm not saying all, I'm saying some would have been better analyzed by a technical team from the Ministry of Health. And these are just suggestions I'm throwing out, Madam Speaker, so that the work of the Joint Select Committee becomes more focused and becomes more fruitful and more productive. And of course, one can also know that many of these recommendations, Madam Speaker, point to policy direction and guidance by the government, by the executive, as opposed to input from parliamentarians. Indeed, Madam Speaker, several of these recommendations have already been implemented. And I will just refer to the report briefly in passing now, if you will permit me, to explain why I have arrived at these conclusions. So if I can direct your attention to page 13 of the report, Madam Speaker. And if we looked at on the primary health care, and for example, if we looked at the health center steps, that's the second paragraph of the report on page 13, I'm referring directly to it now, where some of the recommendations here speaking to extended hours in strategically selected health centers. Just to note that extended hours have already been implemented in many health centers, but of course there is always a need for more, and perhaps the Minister could give consideration to extending those extended hours. The reliable scheduling of medical services, guaranteed and adequate medical presence, and again, what is the reality of the situation here? The issue here really is that the doctors are not staying in the health centers in certain hours, but again, those point to management issues, Madam Speaker. I fail to see how a Joint Select Committee will be able to give any input into what can be a management issue, and that's the broad point I'm making. Again, at the bottom of that page, it speaks to the public health inspectors. The Minister of Health is well aware that there's a dichotomy in terms of two employers for the public health inspectors, and again, that would have to be a policy decision to be made by the government as opposed to a GSC giving input on that matter. If we can move on to pages 15 and 16 of the report, Madam Speaker, with regards to the functioning of the Accident and Emergency Department. And there are many issues here that, have, again, would be management issues, either for the boards or for the RHAs or even for the manager of an Accident and Emergency Department. So I'm saying that, some of these points I'm making is so that we can fine-tune what actually comes to a GSC for better deliberation. Page 17 speaks to ward management. There are many issues, again, which would be management issues that can be dealt with the nurse manager or the medical director. One of the issues here, Madam Speaker, would be the relationship of the doctors and nurses in terms of making the ward rounds. And I just make the point that the report is silent on that, and perhaps the Minister may want to address that. That is something that needs to be addressed in terms of the relationship between the doctors and nurses making the ward rounds. Page 18 speaks to laboratory, and there are quite a few issues that are noted here.
And
Madam
you see,
Speaker, Standing Order 48-1, the member is going into the report, reading directly from the report. He's going page 18, or calling pages, Madam Speaker. The report is not before us, Madam Speaker.
Madam Speaker, on a point of order 40. Standing Order 40.
Member, for point of order 40, the entirety of Standing Order 40, is there a particular provision that you're concerned about?
On the issue of the motion, Madam Speaker.
Please stand.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the issue of the motion, the Leader of Government Business laid 2 reports in this House to be debated. For us to carry those reports to a Joint Select Committee, the report, and you're asking the House to validate to go to a Joint Select Committee to rule on that. We're supposed to be able to at least debate that those reports. So for us to be able to make a learned decision whether or not we want to send those things to a Joint Select Committee. It cannot. So I ask some leeway, because it cannot be that we can just take those reports to a Joint Select Committee. It has to be, the members have to go through those reports, debate the reports, to understand whether it has validity for us to carry to a Joint Select Committee.
Having regard to the point that has been made, as I indicated before, the point of the Joint Select Committee, the actual mandate, is to review and analyze the report. It's to consider the findings and recommendations. It is to report on observations and recommendations. So that I have said, as far as the reports are concerned, we are not here to debate the reports. We are not here to analyze the reports, and I have given to the member leeway in terms of pointing out certain things in the report to give context. But in terms of going into depth into observations, recommendations, findings, my ruling is that that is outside the ambit of this debate for the appointment of a Joint Select Committee for that exact purpose, and I so rule. Member for Faisabat.
thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm so guided. Again, Madam Speaker, I'm just making that point that, for example, and if you would bear with me, if you look at page 18 on the laboratory, and I'm not talking about details, if we look at the first line, Madam Speaker, it says...
But could we have some order? Member for Faisabat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If you would just bear with me, if we look at that line, it says, in the use of laboratory facilities, there must be. I'm just thinking of the position of a member who sits in a Joint Select Committee, Madam Speaker. I mean, is this something that the Parliament has to make, that a member of Parliament has to make a decision on? Because it speaks to arrangements here, which can easily be management issues. And that's the point I'm making. But I'll move on, Madam Speaker. And there are several other issues, Madam Speaker, if we were to peruse this report, and they speak to radiology issues. And I really was hoping that I'd be able to give a little input so that, you know, when the matter goes to the JSC and perhaps the Minister could, you know, have those suggestions. But be that as it may, Madam Speaker, I'll move on. The issue of radiology services is featured here. That has been a big issue. I take it that the government would not want to hear any suggestions going forward. But I'd leave it at that, Madam Speaker, just to say, with regards to laboratory and radiology, just to throw out the fact that the government, being a purchaser of services on behalf of patients, can also look at, you know, perhaps purchasing some of these services outside of the public sector, and can also look at the fact that equipment that lies in the hospitals is not utilized on weekends, and is, you know, these machines are rested at night and so on. So those are just ideas I'm throwing out.
And remember, that's precisely the point. I think the Joint Select Committee, in fact, it may be that in doing what you're doing, you really usurping what would be the function of a joint select committee. Member for Faisabat. Member for Caroni Central, please. Continue, member for Faisabat.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I'll move on. I'll move on quickly, Madam Speaker. If you if you'll allow me, just to look at page 23 and you know what, Madam Speaker, I'm going to hold the suggestions. Perhaps I'd better do that. But also to make a few, the few points for clarification, and perhaps I could seek clarification on this report, Madam Speaker, because on page 23, page 25, Madam Speaker, and perhaps there can be an explanation for this, if you permit me, on the San Fernando General Hospital. And if I may quote from the report, the new facility is totally outfitted with generous allocation of space, but the explanation I seek it says here, was the occupation of the new office complex the best decision?
Difficulty that we're running into, having regard to what you wanted to do. So that I'm not going to allow that, I'm going to ask you to move on.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I was actually going to use that point to point out that perhaps there may be some inaccuracies or incomplete information in the report. That's the point I'm making. Because there is a perfectly logical explanation for why that is so, because
please
being the
move
chairman
on.
of the RET when that took place. But I'll move on, Madam Speaker. There are many other issues that we can look at with regards to the headings, but I take your guidance, Madam Speaker, in terms of where we go. I just want to, again, crave your indulgence to look at page 47 and to look at that in relation to page 66, pages 47 and pages 66, which speaks to hospital rationalization. And on both pages, it speaks to the Couva Hospital. And on page 47, the committee seems to be going out of its way to pronounce that the pediatric facility is not needed at Couva. Yet on page 66...
Member, again, please.
Madam, I was going to make the point that the report also has some contradictions.
I heard the point.
Because
continue.
there's
Next point.
one thing on page 44, but on page 47, but page 66 prevents
Member, I've already
comprehensive
ruled. Please go on. Next point.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I think it probably would, I would leave the first report. There are two reports before us. I would leave the first report. But before leaving that report, if I could just refer to page 72 with regards to legislative changes, and to note that it's very brief, that there are no ideas identified.
Honourable Member, your original 30 minutes are up. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you so wish.
Thank you.
You may proceed.
So, Madam Speaker, I'll move on to the second report, which speaks to the public sector doctors in private practice. And that is the second report before us for discussion. And again, just to make a few broad comments, if I may. This is a very important matter, of course, which is why it has been brought to the Parliament. And the JSC is being asked to consider two positions here, one which is signed by 2 members and the other which is signed by the other 5 members. I must say, Madam Speaker, that again, there is no context provided for the discussion. I would have thought that a matter so important would have been brought, with a lot more context, a lot more data. So again, it speaks across in terms of the lack of data. I'm just making that point. For example, no information is provided on the current doctor-to-population ratio in the country, what the government would expect, what the government desires. There's also no actual data on the numbers of public sector doctors who engage in private practice. I also believe, Madam Speaker, that there are some other issues that the members of a joint select committee will want in front of them to make a pronouncement in this matter, and that would include an impact assessment on the effects of any policy change that will impact on the public health sector. It will also include an analysis, a cost analysis of what it would cost the government and by extension taxpayers to effect such a policy change. And, you know, Madam Speaker, without supporting any of these two positions, I just want to ask a question and something that the JSC could consider in the deliberations. And really, is it fair to deny patients in the public sector the services of doctors with exceptional skills and training?
So, remember, again, the same difficulty that I'm having, and that what you're presenting here will be something that the JSC, if the wish of the House is to appoint one, would go into and consider. Okay? So please, be guided. And
thank you, Madam Speaker. I don't believe I'll be much longer in the circumstances. So I just wanted to say, Madam Speaker, that, you know, whilst we on this side are immensely grateful for the opportunity to view this report and to make an input, I wanted to point out that there are certain shortcomings that the JSC will have to deal with, and those are being, you know, aired in the public domain. I also wanted to make the point that many of the issues are management and policy issues. I would also want to suggest to the government that if they are to bring this report to a committee, that perhaps the Minister of Health, you know, could, you know, get his technical staff to re-examine this report, you know, to flesh out the issues and bring the real issues for the Parliament to debate. So, Madam Speaker, as I close, again, I want to emphasize, re-emphasize that it is our belief on this side that healthcare, like crime and indeed other national issues, is too important a matter to play politics with. Indeed, the quality and scope of healthcare delivery can literally be a matter of life and death, especially for those who cannot afford private healthcare. Illness and ailments do not cross party lines, as you know, Madam Speaker. So we on this side stand ready, willing and able to assist the government in implementing any sensible measures that will improve the health of our citizens, even if it means examining this report in its current form as participants of a joint select committee. Madam Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity and I thank my colleagues for their attention.
Member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, the motion before the House this afternoon is be resolved that a joint select committee be established to consider. So the first issue is whether we agree as an opposition whether a joint select committee should be established or not. So whether the opposition on this side agrees with the government that we must have a joint select committee. That's the first issue. And this seems to be a government, an ABC cabinet, with an ABC cabinet that is unable to run the country and to be able to implement any policy, whether they have a policy or not. So they want help from the opposition now to tell them how to run the health sector. They had a manifesto. They had a manifesto, 2000. The manifesto is big and broad here. And a lot of things they said in the health sector. Why haven't they implemented that? Why have they now come to ask for a joint select committee for us to tell them how to run the health sector? We are willing to do that. If you want that, vacate office, call an election, and we will run the health sector. We will run the health sector, which we did remarkably well in 5 years. Yes, remarkably well in 5 years. So the government wants us to help them with a joint select committee, to engage in discussions with the joint select committee. And what makes us believe that they will take our recommendations when we go there? So therefore, if we go and we give them our points and ideas, which they are bereft of ideas, so they need our input to tell them what they should be doing, which they are not doing. So the question is, do they want us to give them ideas, be with them, and when they can't run the health sector, and the health sector continues to fail, they will blame the opposition because the opposition participated in that joint select committee. So therefore, the ideas that the opposition gave were not good ideas, so that's why the joint select committee had been failing. So the first question we have to answer, whether we agree with the joint select committee to be established or not, and to consider the first report of the committee established to review the levels of healthcare delivery by the regional health authorities. Madam Speaker, in 1937 there was a Moynes report. In 1955 there was a Julian report. In 2006 there was a Gladys Gaffur report on the health sector. And there were 3 volumes under the Gladys Gaffur Commission of Inquiry into and all the recommendations for running the health sector were incorporated in the Gladys Gaffur Commission of Inquiry. Madam Speaker, you had volume 1, 2, and 3. And volume 1, with the executive summary and findings of the Gaffur Commission of Inquiry, produced voluminous recommendations and findings. What is different in this report from the Gladys Gaffur? This is an inferior report to the Gladys Gaffur Commission of Inquiry report. I know, Madam Speaker, I know some of the players on this who provided this report. Dr. Welsh had been my contemporary since 1969. He was the CEO, the Chief Medical Officer of Port of Spain Hospital for a number of years. And Port of Spain Hospital continued to deteriorate under his watch. When 23 doctors left the health service. So what can he come and tell us now in this report that will make us want to join in with the government to analyze this report? There is nothing to be analyzed. All these things have been said already in the Gaffur Commission of Inquiry, many of which the People's Partnership government implemented. We cannot implement everything in 5 years, but we did significant work in that, and we implemented a significant amount of areas, and the Honorable Minister of Health, if he were here, he would tell you what the implementation was and so on. He would go into more detail. So review the levels of healthcare delivery by the regional health authorities and to rationalize the system of public sector doctors in private practice. You have 2 reports. One report was laid in the House on November 9th, 2016. How long ago was that? December, January, February, March, April, May. 6 months ago. So you now come 6 months later and you want to form a joint select committee and to end it by June the 5th.
Next week, Monday.
So a joint select committee to be appointed, and 5 days time we must finish. 5 days to finish the work. Today is the 21st of May.
That is an emotion.
That is an emotion.
Listen. That is an emotion.
The motion says the second part, be it resolved further and the committee be mandated to review and analyze the reports, consider the findings and recommendations contained in the reports, and report its observations and recommendations no later than June 5th, 2017. That's five days from now. Well, did you make an amendment to the report? Did you make an amendment?
When she will make it next year?
I would like to hear the member for Caroni East. And I ask all members to comply with Standing Order 53. Member, please continue.
Madam Speaker, I want to know, when did the leader of the government business amend this, and what date? As I have it here, that I got. June, it says June the 5th. Could you tell us when? Yeah. What standing order is standing?
I'm asking you to give
No. I'm not giving way. I'm not giving way. You will have your time to answer. Yeah. You are judge.
Members. We all are quite aware how one interjects. If the member is not willing to give way, he's within his right, and therefore please proceed.
Madam Speaker, this is a policy document of the government. Policy documents are set by the government and they implement the policies. You want us to tell you what policy? And I will just draw an analogy. There are two significant members on the other side, Madam Speaker. When we were debating, when we had the procurement piece of legislation, which the Honourable Prime Minister said that she would have laid in the first 28 days, and which she did. And we had deliberations after a year, for a year, and we were moving purposefully. And that procurement piece of legislation would have been finished long time ago. But two of the members on that side now in government, who were in opposition then, including the Prime Minister and including the now acting Prime Minister, put us into the corner and said, you have to come with a policy. Yes. Tell us what your policy is. And they stymied the work of the procurement process for 2 years. Until the members, until their people told them they must get back and finish the work of the procurement. So the point I'm making, they asked us for a policy. We had to give them a policy. You have a policy now. Don't ask us to join and support you in your policy. Your policy is fraudulent here. Yes. This is a fraudulent policy on the health sector. It has no meat and it has no substance. All right.
Okay, I'm sure you can.
Sure, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, this policy has no depth. It has no ability to implement anything. It's just words, management jargon that you have to look deep into it to see what it is saying. And all of it is a repetition, whether they copied from the Gladys Gaffur Commission of Inquiry, they didn't copy properly. They didn't copy properly. And they bring a report for us to look at. Now, let me give you some examples. I have the report here, Report 1 and Report 2. So Report 1 was laid 6 months ago. And you're now coming to rush us to form a joint select committee to debate that. And 5 days you're asking us to form the joint select committee, meet on it. We must be working miracle. Yeah? You want us to go in there and say we agree with you, everything, and then get out of the committee and make a recommendation? No, it doesn't work like that. And when my colleague says that we must analyze the report and debate the report today, we should debate the report and then we will determine whether we're in agreement with it or not to go to a joint select committee. And as I stand here now, Madam Speaker, I don't see anything in this report, these two reports, that will merit us going into the Joint Select Committee. And here, what this report says, Madam Speaker, Committee to Review, this is August 29, Report 1. Madam Speaker, I read this from page to page and from word to word. You know, my life has been medicine. Yes. So I'm very much interested in this report. One of the persons who was on this committee was my student. Dr. Ajay Sardusing worked with me for about 3 or 4 years. He's now a gynecologist, of whom I'm proud. I'm proud. There is another member who is in another setting from another university abroad who doesn't understand the culture and what we have to deal with in the healthcare system of Trinidad, but sits on a committee to make recommendations to us, not knowing where we are, what we have done, where we want to go. And he wants us to go to a joint select committee. So those are 3 members. There are two or three other members. I wouldn't want to make any comment on it. But there are members on this committee talking about public sector and private sector practice, whether doctors work in the private sector and public sector. There are 2 members on this committee who did a whole law degree and did their LLB while they were in the hospital, doctors at hospital. They registered as full-time students who did their law degree, the LLB and the LEC. And Hugh Wooding, which is full-time, while they were senior doctors of the hospital, and they come in to tell us today, they come in to tell us today that we must go on a joint select committee. How hypocritical. Yeah. 2 of the members, full-time, law degree, LLB, LEC. No leave, no vacation, working in hospital. And they're telling us. So at first glance, Madam Speaker, this is offensive to us. This is offensive. How can you tell us? One is my student. One doesn't know what Trinidad healthcare system is. One is my contemporary, and he did very well. I would respect my colleague, Dr. Welsh. But poor thing, he doesn't know about management of health sector. He doesn't know anything about it. Listen, Madam Speaker, this is not a boaster. I worked in 17 hospitals around the world. I worked on 4 continents of the world. I worked 3 hospitals in England, 5 in Canada. 3, I went to Johns Hopkins University. I went to 4 universities. Johns Hopkins, University of London, and University of Toronto, and University of the West Indies. So I can tell you what they have written here doesn't deserve any attention whatsoever. And for us to go on a joint select committee and waste our time with that is something that we have to consider. The country is in tatters as far as the health sector is concerned, as far as the economy and as far as the education sector is concerned. They're making a mess around. So they're trying to find an excuse now to say, well, we need all your... You don't need our support to continue to make a mess of what you're doing at the moment. Yeah.
Do it by yourself.
Yeah.
Make your best by yourself.
Executive summary, Madam Speaker. We have to look to see what it is that we need a joint select committee for. This is the executive summary. I'm not going to the detail. The first thing, let me just mention, in concluding this segment, reference is made to a number of incomplete or proposed encounters with professional bodies, representative bodies, and NGO. Mention is made of some of the issues initiated and a need for further attention. That is telling you the work of this committee is incomplete. They're telling you, reference is made to a number of incomplete or proposed encounters with professional bodies, representative bodies, and NGOs. So who did they consult with? When the work is so incomplete, and you go to a JSC, you have to call all these people now. Again. Not again. They didn't call them in the first place.
Call them, they ain't come.
So, how long is that going to take? You have represented, you have the Medical Protection Society, you have the Trinidad and Tobago Medical Association, you have the Medical Board, you have the Doctors Association. Have these been consulted? I see no evidence of that. They want to legislate or go to a joint select committee on the issue of private sector, public sector, whether the doctors should be working in both and so on. But the best people to talk to are the specialists in the country and hear what they have to say. And there are over 200 specialists in the country. Did they bring them together to find out what their thinking is on it?
And you want to go to a joint select.
And you want to go to a joint. That's so the preliminary work of this report hasn't been done. It is a lot of more work that has to be done. So the report has no foundation in it. Has no foundation. And I say this represents the report on Part B remains outstanding. So you do a report, you finish it, and you lay it in Parliament November 9th. You have a next report to do, you lay it on March 24th. And here the question of private doctors and private practice, public sector practice, listen, I would not get myself involved in that because I was a university associate professor and I gave honorary consultancy to the hospital and worked in the hospital harder than most of the doctors working in the public sector. We were honorary consultants as university professors and lecturers. And there were days when Professor Rupnarayan, God bless his soul, and myself will be in an operating theater on a Tuesday. And we do 17 operations from 7:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon using 2 operating theaters. 3 hysterectomies, 4 cesarean section, and smaller cases. And the doctors work very hard. It's a matter of management, Madam Speaker. It is a matter of implementation of programs and effective management.
And a joint select committee cannot.
When a joint select committee cannot help us with that. If you have a honorable minister of health, who is not respected by the medical profession, how can you get the system going? That is the first basic issue. And if you do not have people at the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, at the administrative level, this is one of the pillars that's spoken about in this report. And if you do not have the competence... No.
Okay, good.
I'm not going into it.
There's no depth in the report that merits a joint select committee.
There are 8 pillars on this, and the 8 pillars have spoken for themselves. The 8 pillars that they speak about in this report are on the Gladys Kafur report. And so if they go and they take the time and the pain to look at that and examine the recommendations for that, they would see there is no need for any joint select committee. So really, what is the motive? What is the motive of coming here? Is this the first policy that you want us to give you any help on? We gave you assistance in the FATCA legislation. So when it comes to legislation, and it involves the lives of citizens, this involves the lives of citizens. But the laws relating to the country, this is where we come in. And we go to joint select committees. But not for policy. The people voted for you. You betrayed the people. You gave untruths to the people.
What?
Yeah? The people felt that they were lied to.
How would I just help that?
They felt that they were in deceit. And here it is, you now coming to tell us 20 months has gone, 20 months have gone.
Member for Caroni. Member for Caronies. Just in terms of the word you just used, you had used a word before that was acceptable, and you could continue in the vein of what you know is Parliament.
I'll move on, Madam Speaker. If I offended anybody, I withdraw that offense.
Yeah.
We move on.
I don't know what it is.
I don't know.
I don't know what the offense is.
You had a manifesto on health. And I have it here, and I looked at it as well. 2015, let's do this together, PNM manifesto.
Did they say they went to a joint select committee?
And I really looked to see if there was anything tangible and how it is different, how this report is different from their manifesto. They also had the 2020 vision, Madam Speaker, on health. That was superfluous. It had no depth as well. Management jargon that you could copy from any type of report internationally on health and so on, and put together but nothing tangible to implement. Nothing tangible. And so, why you're not using your 2015 PNM manifesto to help guide you in your implementation of health sector and health sector reform? Why you're not using the information on the 2020 visioning or the new 2030 visioning? You haven't been able to explain that to us. And the leader of government business was trivial in her approach to this motion. Just saying a few words. She said the Joint Select Committee to give an overview and to examine works of the government. Well, we no need to go to no Joint Select Committee to examine your work. Your work has failed. The work of your government has failed in the health sector. And Joint Select Committee to look at the two reports. Well, we're looking at it, but we see no merit in it. We look at it. Ensure Parliament participate in the process. So you want us to participate in this? That makes no sense whatsoever. Has nothing in it. And when you try, everything is a regurgitation of the past. Some may be on your manifesto, some on the 2020 vision, some on the 2030 vision. And this Gladys Gafoor Commission of Inquiry. 1,500 pages, 3 volumes. And that had recurrent problems from previous reports. And this Gladys Gafoor Commission of Inquiry report, mandated by the last Prime Minister, Mr. Manning, when his government found themselves in difficulty in the health sector, and there were serious issues, and then he was forced to call a commission of inquiry in 2004. They completed the work in 2006. And God bless that commission of inquiry. They did tremendous work. And they made a number of recommendations, summary of findings, 25 on page 25, recommendations on page 31, and ended up 7 pages of recommendations and observations on the report of the Vision 2020 subcommittee that also took into consideration the Vision 2020, and critical recommendations from the report of the Commission of Inquiry, new initiatives. So, Madam Speaker, I highlighted all the areas here in this report. And I see it repeated in the Welsh report. Primary health care. They spoke about primary health care. Everybody. Our manifesto had primary health care as well. This report has primary health care as well. But it's not a matter of writing about it. It's a matter of doing it. It's a matter of doing it. So you want to pay emphasis on primary health care. Our Honorable Prime Minister, 2 years before we ended office, said, members of cabinet, what can we do to improve the health sector? And ideas came flowing. And the first idea that came, which we were doing already, was let us try to move faster with implementation of programs in the primary healthcare system. Yeah. And you know what we did? There are 105 health centers in Trinidad and Tobago, 10 district health facilities, 10 hospitals, and 10 private nursing homes. I know it. I lived it. I was chairman of 2 regional health authorities between 1997 to 2000. When I did such a good job in the first Northwest Regional Health Authority in 1997 to 1999, Mr. Pandey asked me to take on the Central Regional Health Authority. And we did a good job. We did a fantastic job. Just give me permission for one thing. The intensive care unit at Port of Spain, yes, which has saved hundreds of lives so far, was built in 1999. Yeah. A new mortuary, a new x-ray department, a new pharmacy, a new waiting area, and so on. Plenty work. And I talk about work in 95 to 2000 and surpassed in 2010 to 2015. So, primary health care. out of the 105 health centers, we opened up 65 up to 9 o'clock in the night and on weekends. 65. And we provided doctors, nurses, attendants, and in some cases pharmacists and lab attendants. And we had the ambulance service. 65. And so when you want to control diabetes and hypertension, the people coming from work in the evening will now go in and get their attention rather than having to take time. You know what has happened? They're talking about primary health care, and this report telling them, as a priority, primary health care must be there. But they closed down a number of these health centers already. A number of these 65 health centers have been closed down. Yes, they're not extending up to beyond 4 o'clock in the evening.
The debate about the health sector. I understood your point, and therefore keep what you're saying to the point which you raised, please.
Right. Good. So I was drawing the analogy in their report on primary health care and what we did and what they should be doing, rather than trying to ask us to come to a joint select committee to tell them that they should be doing what they should be doing, which we did already. That point is made clear, Madam Speaker. The secondary and tertiary institutions I spoke about. The secondary and tertiary institutions, the hospitals, accident and emergency, ward management, lab, I'm reading from the Welsh report. These are the summaries. Radiology, pharmaceutical, bed management, surgery, operating theatre, obstetrics clinics. All these things revolve around the issue of management and competence and supervision. You can write anything you want to write about the health sector. We should do this and we should do that. But if you don't have the right people on board to supervise it and manage it, everything will fail. Everything will fail. So they have made these recommendations here in the report, but it is really a matter for implementation and management. And they don't seem to have the capacity to do that. Because they might, I don't want to cast any aspersion on any board, but Dr. Rambachan, a member for Tabakeet, and some of my colleagues who were in the last administration, when we started to give some assistance to our Minister of Health. Yes. And we said that management is the important thing, which this report has not even touched. Well, they refer it to a bit. We had a CEO for the Northwest Regional Health Authority who is to walk the floor probably once every 2 weeks. And we had boards who don't even go into the hospital.
And we have boards given no contract.
So you could write anything here on your report. But the issue is getting the things done by getting people to work and work well and meaningful.
Honourable Member for Caroni East, your original 30 minutes have expired. You're entitled to 15 more minutes if you wish to, as extended time. You may proceed.
Yeah. So secondary and tertiary institutions, we built a number of additional secondary and tertiary institutions. We expanded the teaching hospital at the Chancery Lane, and that was to help in the university getting there, using it for teaching, and of course to prevent the overload from San Fernando Hospital and to have better clinics and so on. So when this Welsh report tells us now improving secondary and tertiary institutions, the Point Fortin Hospital is going on now. I hope that they continue it, because for almost 2,000 under PNM, they have been asking for a Point Fortin Hospital. They take a People's Partnership government and start the Point Fortin Hospital. They have been talking for a REMA hospital for a long time. It's a People's Partnership government started a REMA hospital. Yeah. Well, it's sad. A lot of my undergraduate training and up to 1978, I worked at Port of Spain Hospital, 74 to 78. And the block at Port of Spain Hospital reports, the scientific reports have shown that there are problems there. We recognize that as a people's partnership. And the Honorable Prime Minister, with the member responsible for UDCOT, did an assessment of Port of Spain Hospital, structural, and made a recommendation that we will have to build a new hospital system in Port of Spain called the Port of Spain Hospital Medical Complex in Port of Spain. And UDCOT was beginning to move that way. So 20 months have passed. You ain't do a thing in the health sector yet. Everything is getting worse. Yeah. No medicine, no oncology drugs, no CDAP drugs. They can't get the things for surgical practice, to do the things for surgery. So how could a joint select committee help that, Madam Speaker? You know, Madam Speaker, I'm sure you're getting the point that these things are essential ingredients in the successful management of any healthcare system. So secondary and tertiary institutions are dealt superficially with it. Build more hospitals. We did that. So Arima has now, Sangre Grande has been renovated. The Mayaro District Health Facility has been improved. Point Fortin Hospital is going on, the Chancery Lane Complex, and more important, the Couva District Hospital. The Couva District Hospital is laid to waste. The overcrowding at San Fernando can be taken care of there. You want to, the government said that they will have a public sector, private sector partnership from since they came in. 20 months have passed. Have we got any idea of what is happening with this public sector partnership, public sector, private sector partnership for Mount Hope, for the Couva Hospital, when already they were determined that certain phases will go through gradually and the complex will be utilized. By the time they get the public sector, private sector thing going, 5 years would have passed. And they're out. And they're out of government. And the hospital laid to waste, just like the Beach High School, which was closed down for about 10 years, which like the schools in South, that Parvati and Shiva boys and so on, which are now being closed and not being continued. Whether it's spite of vindictiveness, I don't know. Yeah. So services delivery, ward management. That is, you don't need a joint select committee to tell you about ward management. You don't need a joint select committee to tell you about running a laboratory. The people in San Fernando Hospital now, when they have to have their laboratory investigations done, they have to take it out privately. To have it done privately, then brought back to the hospital, that could cost patients lives while they're waiting on investigative reports, lab reports. So where would a joint select committee tell them how to improve their lab? Radiology. 4 CT scanners going down one time. MRI breaking up. Member for Shagwana Seas. You remember? MRI, 4 CT scanners down. You need a joint select committee to tell you that you should be managing your CT equipment properly and having them serviced with a biomedical team around all the hospitals, and so that the biomedical team could ensure that these things don't break down. Pharmaceutical, retired, nauseating, C40, and Honorable Minister with the protocols and C40 and the procurement of drugs and all of that. Pure old talk. And he cannot even identify which of the CDAP drugs that he said were inefficacious. Went through a 10-minute thing in Parliament here, the country still don't know. So when you come at a report here and you talk about pharmaceuticals, where is that helping? Bed management. We have a hospital ready to help you with the bed management. You don't need a joint select committee to tell you about bed management. Surgery, operating theaters. Get the operating theaters fixed. Get your system working. Why is there San Fernando Hospital, they can do 7,500 operations in 1 year. And Port of Spain Hospital, you do 2,500. 3 times better in San Fernando Hospital than Port of Spain. It's a culture. So where are you going to change that? This report will tell us, a joint select committee will tell us what the culture is. You have to get the people working. You have to get. So for the Spain Hospital operating theatre, supposed to start at 7:30 and finish 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The nurses shift end. By the time 1:30 in a case that might take 2 or 3 hours, about to go on, they say no. Don't start that case because my shift finishing at 3 o'clock.
Don't say that.
So therefore, you do 2 cases, your changeover time from one surgical case to another is an hour. At Mount Hope, our changeover time used to be 10, 15 minutes. You move from one theatre to another, back and forth. And even privately, it's done very quickly. So you don't need a joint select committee to tell you how to run your operating theatres. Pillar 2, infrastructure. I spoke about that Port of Spain General Hospital, St. James, St. Anne's, Eric Williams, Medical San Fernando General Hospital, Sangre Grande, and Scarborough. It took us, after Scarborough Hospital was earmarked in 2000 to cost $120 million. Under the P&M, it ended up costing over $780 million. And we, the People's Partnership Government, had to complete the Scarborough Hospital. They didn't have the capacity and the capability to complete it.
That's where Gravel and Son walk away.
Pillar 3, Madam Speaker, the vertical services. Oh God, that's supposed to be run from the Ministry of Health as a vertical service with the competency that is needed. Chemistry, food and drugs. How many pharmaceuticals or things come into this country and the Food and Drug Division not working properly? What have you done about it? You're in charge now, you're in government. Don't look for us to help you. You have to do it. The National Blood Transfusion Service, 3 people get HIV positive because of the inefficiency and the incompetency at the National Blood Transfusion Service. The thoracic medical, that's at Cora Hospital. What has been happening at Cora Hospital? What has been happening at Cora Hospital? No improvement. So people needing chest surgery, lung surgery for all this cancer of the lungs and so on. No improvement. But we did a lot of work at Cora Hospital. And so we need the work to go on. We don't need a joint select committee to tell you that you need to do what you have to do. The dental services is a vertical service. Let the regional health authorities, each one of them, deal with the dental cases just like the medical and the surgical and the obstetrics and so on. The Trinidad and Tobago Public Health Lab, that has been doing a formidable job. And Dr. Hospitalis ought to be sincerely congratulated and complimented for the work he has been doing. The Queen's Park Counseling Clinic, I think Professor Bartholomew is in charge of that, and he's helping a lot of HIV patients and so on in the management. That was my former teacher. He and Professor Bobron and Professor Bartholomew and Professor Butler were the first generations that came to Trinidad to help open the medical school. And we are the second generation. Yeah. So, nutrition and metabolism. Where is that? Extinct. You don't hear anything about any advice on nutrition. Population program, the family planning services, in the district health facilities, they have no assistance in terms of what you can give them in the family planning program. Insect vector control. Man, the Zika virus flourishing in Trinidad and everything happening. Patients who are pregnant, 17,000 patients, fearful of Zika. And the insect vector control sitting down and not spraying their country. When you ask what is happening, nothing is happening. So, would this report help us? Would this joint select committee help us? No, Madam Speaker. Health Education Division. You should be blasting the airwaves. Don't, on your diet for diabetic and hypertensive patients. Prevent obesity. A proper lifestyle. And so as your flash history, a pap smear in terms of prevention. A mammogram in terms of prevention. A colonoscopy in terms of prevention. A prostatic-specific antigen, PSA, in terms of prevention for cancer of the prostate. All these things should be at the forefront. Yeah, at the forefront. Madam Speaker, it pains me to have read this thing. And then they're talking about training. They closed down gate. Almost closed it down. Minister Karim worked hard, member for Chaguanas East, worked tirelessly and long hours to make sure that Tonapuna, the nursing teaching institution came on, El Dorado. And we were training there to 500 nurses per year. Where is that gone now? Closed down? Yeah, closed down. So, Madam Speaker, what about the personnel? Doctors and nurses and lawyers. We short up nurses, keep on the training. Even though you train nurses to go abroad, that's all right. Don't close it down now, don't train less nurses. We have 180 doctors in the country waiting for jobs and they can't get their jobs. A lot of them want scholarships and they want to make sure that the scholarships are, they pay back for the scholarship by serving for a period of time. And they're not given the opportunity. 180 of them waiting for jobs.
Specialists?
Yeah, and specialists waiting as well. Man, you would grab onto a specialist because the doctors that we train in Trinidad and Tobago at the University of the West Indies Medical School are second to none in the world. We are the best. Any part of the world they go to, you will find them leading. They're in charge of this hospital. They are professors internationally. One of the guys I trained, who worked with me for years, he's now professor at the university. They're having the medical examinations today, Professor Bassau. Yes? Okay. That is it. So, RHA, Pillar 4, RHA Executive Administration. Get the administration to work. Pillar 5, Chief Medical Officer. What is the Chief Medical Officer doing? Pillar 6, Ministry of Health Administration. What the Minister of Health will do or has been doing to make sure that the RHA chairman working, the chief medical officer working, and the Ministry of Health Administration working. So that in summary are the pillars of this report. Report 1 and the private practice issue with consultant doctors is report 2. Madam Speaker, on analysis of this, we see no justification for us going into a joint select committee. But if we are forced to, which I doubt that they will want to force us, we will give them words of advice. Yes. And we will give them pearls to the swine. Oh. Because I take that back, Minister, I take that. Yeah, I take that. So, there's a lot of work to be done in the health sector. Patients' lives are very honorable to all of us. And we will continue to work assiduously to make sure that the lives of every citizen, every child becomes better, and we do not lose lives as a result of incompetence. So, Madam Speaker, the debate on that, as far as we're going with a joint select committee or not, is something that we have to carefully think about. And the June the 5th date is unrealistic, and they have to come with an amendment to bring this. So thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Member for Orukuchis.
Yes.
Member for Orukuchis.
Thank you so much. Madam Speaker, I joined the debate on this motion, but first, really I should congratulate on behalf of all members the professorial analysis that came before me from the member for Caroni East and the very careful thoughts of the member for Faizabad on this matter. So I become now the third doctor to speak on this motion. But Madam Speaker, not being a medical doctor, I assure you that I will not be able to go into the details of the reports before us, even if I was permitted to do so. I also will suffer in comparison to the member for Caroni East if I attempt to get into any detail of the health sector. But my purpose really is to share a few points on the motion and to speak on the purpose of the motion, the intention of the government to pursue a joint select committee for this specific purpose, and to advise really on what other avenues may be available to the government to discuss, redraft policy, and effectively implement policy. So I will focus, Madam Speaker, not on the contents of the report per se, but really on but really on the governance issue of executing policy to project and implementing. Because I understand
from the mover of the motion, that was the intention. You see, Madam Speaker, there's also another issue I'll come to later as to the establishment of a joint select committee, what is required for that in terms of resources, time, money, etc. Now, it has been the experience of all governments, not only this government, that you go through processes where various ministries will advise of the establishment of a committee, a specialized technical committee, to focus on specific areas of public policy. So you may have reports, as we always do, on crime, on health, on sports, on housing, etc. When those reports are done, by definition, they ought to be submitted to Cabinet. And Cabinet will look at the reports, and Cabinet will either agree or note the contents of a report. I assume these reports have gone to Cabinet, and the Cabinet would have noted the contents or agreed, as the case may be. It may have been a better approach for the government to establish an implementation committee to implement the findings of the report if you believe those findings merit implementation and advance the process. The member for Caroni East was at pains. He was at pains to point out that there may not even be merit in the report that would validate going to a joint select committee. A joint select committee is a very important institution of the Parliament. It is not something to be taken for granted. It is not something you come at a whim and fancy. And you know, this very government spent 6 months. We had to take them kicking and screaming to a joint select committee on FACTA, which was a bill. There is no bill here. There is no, and maybe hold it lower, there is no bill. There is no draft legislative measure to deal with health. So that when you get a report like this, if you believe as a cabinet and as a government, it merits implementation, there's something there. Establish a committee. You may choose to put ministers and persons who are not ministers, who are operational people, and implement your policies. What is the purpose of going to a joint select committee on policy documents like this? I mean, again, I don't want to go into detail about all these business, secondary, tertiary, and so on. But you cannot be inviting the opposition to join you at the level of a joint select committee on matters that the cabinet must deal with. The executive has a responsibility to approve policy. And this government is now on a track. They are on a track of closing down the state enterprise. Yes. They are shutting down the government and subcontracting out the work. Yes. They are subcontracting the work of the government. If you cannot do the job, get out of town. Get out of town if you can't do the job. There are others on this side ready, waiting, able to manage the affairs of the government, the Ministry of Health and others.
Competence resides here.
The competent resides here. So you cannot say that you have two documents, and again, the member for Caroni East went in, to speak about the people who wrote it, about the general contents of it, and we are getting the impression that it is weak.
No, it is.
So that if it is devoid of substance, what are you telling a joint select committee to do? May I remind the very government, there's another institution in the Parliament, that a committee that deals with reports on state enterprises and special purpose companies and so on, and deals with health. There's a standing committee of the Parliament that deals with health, matters pertaining to health. This report, if you believe is a great report and good work and so on, could go to a committee that already exists. Let them review that committee, this report.
That is already a joint select committee.
What? Yes, sir. And that is a standing committee which is already composed of all the constituent groups of the Parliament, a joint select committee.
And the RHAs come on.
And the RHAs come there. Health reports go there. Just for education as well. I imagine that EFCL matter should be before the Parliament as well. It's coming Monday. So that on Monday, we have a classic example, Shogunas East is now pointing out. On Monday, a joint select committee will meet to deal with education and a critical report on the corruption at the EFCL. They're giving out food and contract on the same second floor. So the same committee that deals with health can meet, refer the report. So I advise the government, you can refer the report to the existing standing joint select committee that deals with health. And they can call in people, interview, find Dr. Welsh and Dr. whoever, and deal with the matter. So where you have an instrument already available to the government, why do you want to replicate? Why do you want to go over and over and create another joint select committee? Madam Speaker, I lost count, but I think we have about how much joint select committees?
17.
So I think we have 17 joint select committees in this Parliament operating at the same time. How much more members will do? When you put a joint select committee in operation, it is the resources of the Parliament. It is the work of members, including government ministers. So you take government ministers, I imagine the Minister of Health may find himself on a joint select committee like this. You take him away from managing the very health sector to go and spend hours in a joint select committee to examine a weak report without merit and without substance, we are told. The Minister of Health has to spend hours away from his desk. The Minister of something else has to spend hours away from his or her desk. The staff of the Parliament has to be engaged. You have to pay for services. Suppose the Joint Select Committee decide that we need some technical independent advice on matters. Because these persons here who wrote this, according to Karen East and Faizabad, are persons who are connected to the public sector health system. Suppose the Joint Select Committee decided we need technical competence that is independent from this to understand these issues. You have to pay. And that doesn't come easy. Don't come cheap. It don't come cheap. So you have, and not timely. So you are going to waste time, enormous time, parliamentary time. We had an example earlier today. Yeah, you already have a committee that is there established by the standing orders for the purpose of examining health reports and the health sector. You come with this next one to put a next committee now. How is this government operating? Today we had a scandalous example where the Parliament had to be suspended almost embarrassingly while the government get their act together. And this is another case of wasting parliamentary time, the time of critical ministers who should be managing the sector to come in a talk shop to discuss a weak report. So you have the avenue for the Joint Select Committee, which is already established. Okay, if the government wants now to hear the views of the opposition on this report, because they don't want to hear the views of the opposition on the report, at least not in this Parliament here, because this is why the motion is so worded. The motion reads, be it resolved that a Joint Select Committee be established, and when that is interpreted by the Speaker, your good self, ma'am, correctly, when the interpretation comes, it is to establish a Joint Select Committee. So clearly, by the very wording and the conduct of members opposite, they are not interested in hearing members of the opposition speak on the health sector. They're not. All you had to do is what previous governments have done before. I remember former Prime Minister, Mr. Patrick Manning, had this, interest in laying reports. All you do is create a government motion that the House debate the two reports of these health committees, so that you can get policy advice, you can get recommendations. The very people who you don't want to hear now, you say, we don't want to hear you today, but go in a room somewhere on the 6th floor, we'll hear you there. That's what I'm saying. And spend more money. At a time when money is in short supply, they say. They're telling us money is in short supply. Cut to suit, is that the term? And people are cutting to suit. It's just some are bigger than others. You know, if you're big, well, then you cut a bigger piece of cloth.
You may say 92,000.
So when we're squandering money with roaming and with romping and with other things, you want to go and squander more money, spend more money on an exercise that will take time. Now look at the next problem we have. Unless I am mistaken, I stepped out of the chamber only for a minute or two. The member for Aruka Maloney acknowledged but did not tell us, unless I'm mistaken, what any new proposal on the time report its observations and recommendations no later than June 5th, 2017. Now, we have no other time, so we have to go by what we have on the motion.
Debating what is here.
So I am debating what is before me. I cannot debate, you know, what I can't dream of what the government is thinking. You know, I don't have that power to dream up where they're thinking, where they're going. So I am debating what is given to me. And what is given to me is June 5th. What you want to establish a joint select committee today, May 31st, to report June 5th?
5 days.
They tried that with the factor, I think, you know. It can't. So you have, I would have assumed that the person moving this motion, the very first thing they would have done is say, look, given where we are now, June 5th is out of the question. We are talking July. But Madam Speaker, by standing orders, the session of the Parliament comes to an end on or about the second week of July. So you are coming to establish a joint select committee when the session, the second session of the 11th Parliament, I believe. Is it? Yeah. When the second session of the 11th Parliament comes to an end in a few days. What purpose is this? By the time you call and appoint chairman and quorum and any other business, session gone. And putting it here is going to waste parliamentary time of all, including the critical ministers. You could have simply come with a government motion and say, let's debate the contents of the report, and you get all your views. You get all your views. You could have done that. You could have sent the report to the Joint Select Committee that is established dealing with health. But you know, I believe there's something more, but I don't want to use that word sinister, but there's something deeper and a motive that is different. Because like crime, this is a critical sector. And it may well be, Madam Speaker, that it is the intention of the government to engage in talk shop so that they can postpone action, postpone program, postpone project, and postpone implementation by telling the population, we don't have results in the health sector yet, but Parliament is looking at it. Parliament, and we're waiting on the opposition. This is a blame of the opposition. They want to blame the opposition again. They blame us for everything. I think that tomorrow they may blame us for the gas fine, I think. They may blame us for that too, for the gas fine by tomorrow. Yeah, we hope so. Yeah. We will take credit. Anything announced tomorrow, it is the responsibility of the People's Partnership. Put that in place, the fiscal regime, the incentive arrangements, and so on. If we have good news tomorrow, it is the People's Partnership, is a government led by the member for Siparia that took that action. But they won't blame us tomorrow, I'm sure. They will blame us today. But you put this to a Parliament. Parliament goes on recess by standing order, July and August. When we get back in September, we have a budget. We expect a budget. When is this Joint Select Committee meeting? The budget will come mid-end of September. There's a long, that budget is an intensive process. Might I remind you, the standing orders were amended. When you finish a debate in the budget, then you go into this long process where the entire public service lines up outside the doors here to come for scrutiny, for accountability as we examine the books. That process finishes in October. We go to in October, you go to the other place. It is the same parliamentary staff required. You go for an intensive debate in the other place, October finish. You know what you're telling us today? Help you to establish a joint select committee so that by November they could meet and conduct the business of this joint select committee in November. This is trying to fool the population, to hoodwink the people into thinking that you are doing something, when in truth and fact you are doing nothing. I had the opportunity, Madam Speaker, to sit on a committee appointed by the Cabinet to assist with the overseeing and implementation of policy and program in the health sector. That committee did more work in 1 year than this government did in 2 years. We did more work. And Member for Caroni spoke to that earlier. We met every single week. It was after FNGP, I think, on Monday. Every single week, 8 ministers and all the technical people in the health sector met at the office of the Prime Minister. And every week we are pushing, implementing this, implementing that, implementing the other. Machines, equipment, complaints coming here. We dealt with it that way, St. Joseph. Not by calling the opposition in a back room in Parliament somewhere and taking 2 years to study a report that lacks depth and substance. Because when you go to a joint select committee, assuming the government use its majority, you go to this committee. Committee meeting to do its work in November. Huh? You have to call the same people who Caroni has mentioned. I think one was his past student. He passed the subject? Yeah. Well, a good one. He passed. Well, the teacher would have been influenced. So you have to call those persons. Listen, I will not be disturbed by St. Joseph. He has his stress already there.
A failing health ministry, you mean?
Madam Speaker, yes, Madam Speaker, and I just want to remind the House, this very government, and I want to remind you, did not think a joint select committee could be convened and could complete its work in a week when they fought us tooth and nail to establish a joint select committee last September. They did not think a joint select committee could complete its work. And today they want to put a joint select committee to complete its work. Well, it's farcical to think on Monday, but by July, because the session comes to an end. What are you doing? And while that is happening, people can't get beds in the hospital. They can't get medication. They can't get critical services. They can't get chemotherapy. That's a crisis. You have a crisis-ridden health system.
Can't get lab work.
You cannot get lab work as well. How will a joint select committee starting to work in November help the current problems that they face in the health sector? How? They can't. You know? So this is not urgent. What is urgent is getting medicine in the hospital, getting the operating equipment working, getting the services delivered. 150 doctors unemployed, some pulling PH, working as clerical officers. You cannot engage them. You cannot open the Couva hospital in 20 months. You cannot do that. A joint select committee will help to do that. A joint select committee will open the Children's Hospital. A joint select committee will build the Point Fortin Hospital, the Arima Hospital. When we were in office, in 16 months or so, we converted a shell building in San Fernando to a full teaching hospital. We moved for Point Fortin to Arima. The Children's Hospital was built in 3 years. And today they make remarks about that Children's Hospital. It was built by a Chinese contractor with international reputation for building across the world. That wasn't built by a box drain contractor. And it's there. The Chinese president himself went to that site. And when you cry shame and talk about the hospital, you are bringing into disrepute the government and people of China. You ought not to do that. Madam Speaker, so I am saying that this government has alternatives to what they are doing now. I've given the government 2 clear suggestions what you could do if you so choose. This you cannot do. You cannot take time to do this. It will not happen. You are wasting precious time when you could be doing something real and tangible and fixing the system. We need a Minister of Health who is a Mr. Fix-It. Not a Minister of Health who just talks about protocol and strategy and tactic and architecture and menu and pillars and so on, while all the pillars fall down. You need a Minister of Health who is hands-on on the job. That is what we need. And to go and engage, I will feel sorry if the Minister of Health have to go and spend 26 hours attending JSC meeting to hear Dr. Welch and others on a report that says nothing new.
Honourable members, it's now 4:30. This House now stands suspended and shall resume at 5 o'clock.